Couple of users asked how you can go about creating a nice wavy character for an afro-based or coily hair. And another user asked how you can create fade, at least a nice fade, using the new geometry node system, or basically grooming hair in Blender in general. So this video, that's what we'll be kind of trying to achieve. This is the final result which I did from just preparing for this tutorial. You can see we have some wave going on in it. You could make it more, you could intensify it, or you could just have it very toned down. And before we get into the tutorial, let's kind of peruse the scene and see how everything is put together. I'm using this add-on called Hairbreak. It's a very affordable add-on which you can find on the Blender market. So we can see the steps. This hair is of course geometry node hair, the standard curve. I groomed a simple part. I groomed the curve to kind of follow certain patterns, which I'll be showing you how I achieved it. And then we can add a trim because I decided I wanted to make it a bit shorter. Then I added a base coiliness, then added some noise to kind of break it down. So this is the usual way I create afro hairstyle with my setup. And then I use the cut to kind of make the edges more crisp, make it cleaner. You could even go some more if you really want to kind of remove all of this. And then I added the wave. It looks much better when you kind of enable the full amount of the children. But then after that, to emphasize the wave, it has another level of control with the trim. So that can control like how high do you want the wave, so you really have control. And then we have the fade, base fade, and then I added another fade to really kind of clear out the bottom layer. Okay, so let's go into a new Blender scene, and I'm gonna bring out my just this base head asset, which is given by the Blender foundation. It's free to download, and I will just place it here. Before you start working with any geometry node hair, or before you start creating hair with geometry node, unlike the particle system, you need to have good UV map. So luckily this has a good UV unwrap, and we don't have to create ours, but just kind of like a point to note, you need to always do that. Now with Hairbreak, like I said, it's a very helpful tool that I created, and you can kind of get your copy. A lot of people have it already, and that's partly why I'm making this video. But anyways, you could create hair like the way you usually create it with geometry node, or you could just come here and add in your hair system. So it's basically adding a new hair curve with our own custom setup. So there are several ways you could generate hair. Right now you see nothing, but you could easily go into the sculpt mode by clicking this brush and using the density to kind of draw out your hair. If you want to go a more procedural approach, you can just click on generate hair, and then it generates the hair. Right now it's kind of looking out of place, and the basic reason for that is we didn't apply the rotation of the object. So we'll go to this menu here and apply rotation and scale. Once you do that, it should be good. So now is to determine the length of your hair. So I'm going to set this 0.01, probably 0.02. We can always change that later. And right now it's been generated over the entire head. We need to kind of isolate it to certain region. So let's create a density map to kind of mask out certain regions. For that, I'm going to click on new and call this head mask. And depending on the size of your UV map will determine the resolution you want to use. This would work great, so I'm just going to set it to white and hit OK. So right now we see nothing, since white means no hair exists. You can always invert it if you prefer it any other way. Okay, so by clicking this, it takes you to the texture paint mode, where it has already set up all your textures all you need to do is just jump in and start painting. So I'm going to switch the color to black and make sure my X symmetry is turned on, and now I can draw here. Note that if we go closer, there are some fall-offs. So if you want something looking more crisp, you'll probably need a more crisp fall-off. So for that, we can switch this to something like this. This will give us the smooth, maybe this, give us a more crisp fall-off. Okay, so let's paint this. I'm done painting the texture, so you can take time to make sure you have it looking nice and neat. Once we're done, you can click on where there is. So you want to click on Save All Images. What this does, it saves it in the blend file, that even if you close Blender and restart it, it's always going to be there. You can later on choose to save out the image texture to your folder or any other thing. Okay, so now it's all a matter of kind of setting this up. I'm going to set the length to 0.25 for the density. I'm going to go with something like let's say 30. So this will be our guide hair. So we can click on apply, and now we have our hair. To groom it, we could just go straight into the sculpt mode and just start grooming. Or a more kind of procedural way is we can disable this for now and then add a simple Bezier curve. We'll switch it to draw and switch to surface. I'm going to use absolute 0.02. If we draw on the surface, you can see it sticks. Go with 0.025. So now I'm gonna just start drawing it like this. Okay, just to kind of follow a nice pattern. It flows like almost in a spiral form from that center origin point. And then from this part, we will start drawing it down. So this is a fun process. You can always kind of go back and change things later on. So we're just drawing like a guide we want the hair to follow. One thing you would note is you need somewhat of a consistency. If I enable the normals, reduce the size. You can see I have a certain level of consistency where everything that goes down, the normals are going in the same direction. I don't know if this has much impact, but just to be safe, it's good to kind of, like if you want this to go down, you have to use the same normal direction just to make everything consistent and neat. Okay, so we have our guide and we can enable the hair. So we'll just grab this and go into the modifier stack. And in the operation, we want to get the follow curve modifier. And we'll switch the curve to this curve we created earlier. And as you can see, it does its best to follow it. So now it's a matter of going in and playing with the parameters so that it really follows the guide, the curve guide. So I'm going to add subdivision to this mesh to make it smoother. So we can play with the mixed surface normal, so it kind of doesn't just completely rest on the scalp. Since this is an afro hair, it tends to be more like pointed up, if you get what I mean. It doesn't just kind of rest on the scalp since it's coily. So just raise it up slightly. There are a lot of other parameters you could play with. You could really make it follow the curve one-to-one, or you make it follow it loosely. You can switch the tangents. Okay, so if you're happy, you can choose to apply this, but you can also choose to leave this as it is. So for this particular region where in the side bonds, it doesn't seem to be flowing nicely, you can just draw even as you have your head there. So you can always kind of fix this if you need to. By the way, if you've gotten this copy of Fabric previously and you're not able to achieve exactly what I'm doing, I implore you to uninstall the current version you have and download the latest version. I updated it yesterday with a lot of new cleanup and kind of fixes for any issues that will exist. So it's something that I always try to keep updated and keep working. Okay, so we have this looking nice. Like I said, you can go ahead and apply this modifier and even delete the curve. And from this point on, you can just go right into the grooming and kind of make any necessary adjustment. I'm quite happy with this, so there will not be any need for that. Okay, so the next is just making sure the base guide curve looks clean, because any other styling, which is the easier part, will not work well if you don't have the base guide curve looking great. So you need this this is like the most important part of your grooming process. So let's add some children here. We're going to be using interpolated, and we can just reuse the head marks we created earlier. You could choose to view your guide curve if you don't want, if you need it, since it will reduce the amount of children hair you will need to add. So you just add as needed. Because if we don't have this, we'll probably need to add more. But if you have this, it kind of already solves some problems for you. Um, I can leave this at 60. We can also control how the taper effect will work. If by default Hairbrake already kind of switches to this in render mode, it switches to the strip. If you're in strands, you can switch this manually by yourself. We also adjust the subdivision for you, since it's something most beginners will have problem kind of figuring out why their hair looks bad. But we kind of adjust that automatically for you. So now we can come here in the radius and set this to 0.01, just adjust it. And also for the taper, which you can control how big it is, we can kind of scale it down very slightly. So depending on the look or how realistic you want it to be, you can always adjust that. So looking at this guide curve, I can see some potential problems right here. So I can go in the sculpt mode and address those potential problems by just kind of cleaning it up. And at this point, we can start doing some test renders. So my test render setup is just I add a camera. I already have an HDR map set up for this with all my scenes, so it just loads in automatically. For the head, I'm just gonna give it a very gray color with no specularity. And for the hair itself, I'm going to set it to black. And we can go around to see how it's all working. So what we're looking for is that it's clean and neat. You'll see some part that might look sparse, at least for this particular hairstyle. That's okay, because when we add the coiliness, when we add like the coily effect, it's going to kind of fill out those spots. But what you need most importantly is that the direction and distribution of the hair is very clean. Also, if you have some subdivision, you can click on rest surface position to kind of make it conform more and look even more smoother. And we can give this a nice render. I'm going to adjust the HDRI slightly so this can be visible. I will increase the resolution, and for my render samples, I'm using one, maybe 200 will be good for this. We'll render this. So it looks like we're all good with the cleanliness of the guide curves. So we can move on to the styling phase. So for the styling of an afro hair, it's pretty straightforward. At least through my process. It comes with a preset. This one doesn't have that preset, but anyway. So you can watch me create it basically. So what I do first of all is add a simple coily. So you could use the advanced coily or the simple coily. One of them is more process intensive, so you can guess the advanced one is more process intensive. The simple is not processor intensive, but they're both kind of optimized enough. But this kind of gives you a faster feedback. So what we'll do with this is to adjust it to fit this character. So we're going to reduce the scale to 0.002, and we can see the coiliness working for us. I'm also going to reduce the coiliness to probably like 9. So depending on your character, if it's a more depending on the character hair texture you're kind of going for, you can always make it more coily. You can make the frequency more or less. So probably 0.3 should do a good job, and you can always test render it to kind of see how it's coming together. So once we have that coiliness, once we have that coiliness, we can now add noise. So add noise, and it kind of breaks the coiliness slightly. So I'm going to reduce the factor so it's not so intense to 0.007. So this is it with without noise, and this is it with noise. I will also increase the scale along curve to 100, just to kind of give you some. What this does is basically the default noise makes it more spiky and kind of scatters it, but the more you scale along curve, it becomes more conform to the shape. So let's probably increase this to 0.01. So you want to kind of check it that it's coming together nicely. You can even give it another test render. So as you can see, adding that noise kind of enhance that afro texture to it. So at this point, depending on what you're going for, if you're going for like a full blown afro, this will work. But since I'm going for a clean, sharp trim, sharp like haircut with waves and stuff, you would need it to be kind of lower. So for that, I'm using the trim and just setting it to 0.5. So it's going to reduce the length of the hair. So we could try 0.4. So depending on what you're going for, you kind of do that. And if you have some sparseness and you need it to be like really full, you solve that by increasing the children count. So 60 is working for me currently, and it makes my blender seem more responsive. Maybe for the final render we can increase it. Yeah, so this is looking good, and we can move on to the next phase, which is adding the waves. But before we do that, if you want your hair to be more like clunky and kind of choppy, like most afro hair textures will look like, you can achieve that simply with using Clump after the stage. Set this to 0.05. You kind of see it breaks it down and makes it more like, if we really set this to a different render layer or image, going to make it kind of almost like you did not brush it. So that's how you kind of achieve that. but that's not what we want. We want it more clean and more kind of slick. Okay, so to really bring this together, head to make a hair more slick, we need it to be shiny enough and to look slick. So we can go into the material for now, and you could play with the colors. If you want to kind of get more reflectivity, what I usually do, it's not physically correct, but it works. We could use like a principal shader and use the specularity it gives to enhance that. Okay, this actually works. So maybe 0.2. For creating the waves, we'll duplicate this modifier, and we'll move it down after the noise, and we can call this waves. So the waves, the theory behind it, it's just basically creating a distinction between the coiliness from a particular section of the hair to another section. So we can create that distinction using image mask. And I'm going to create a new mask, and we'll just call this wave. So I'm going to use a higher resolution texture for this and set this to white and click OK. So we can go right into the texture and start drawing it. So for this particular instance, we'll not be using the symmetry since we want it to basically not have symmetry. So I'm going to turn off the hair for now, and kind of like the pattern we had going for the hair, that's the same pattern I would use for the wave. So for the fall off, I'm going to probably use this. Kind of start with a spiral. Okay, and you can kind of close it off here. So the spiral really doesn't have to connect because you don't want it to look mechanical. So we can just start drawing in the waves. So for this, I can enable symmetry so we don't have to do double the job. So we can just connect it here. So it's just you drawing how you want the waves to proceed and look. So this is what we have. I'll go ahead and save the image. Obviously, you can always come in and fix any necessary issues. Enable all hair. We should start seeing the effect of the wave. So we just need to modify this. So we can disable all and enable just this particular one. So for the coiliness, I'll probably use more coiliness around the wave section. And for the scale, I'll make it way bigger. And I think if we need it cleaner, we'll probably have to reduce the noise slightly. So there you go. We can test render this. So we can go closer and make any necessary adjustment. So depending on what you need, you can also trim it down even some more. And reduce the wave height. Okay, so let's give this a test render and see how we're doing so far. It looks good, but a couple of things. The the size of the individual strand seems bigger, and this needs to be blended more. So you could blend it by taking it to an external software and blurring out the line slightly, and probably adding like some zigzag effect to kind of break the cleanliness of the line. But since I just want to kind of make this quickly, I will start by fixing the density of the size of the individual strands to make it smaller. Okay, so that's one solution, one problem solved. So, and then we can make this 0.4. Okay, so I like how it's looking. Now we can go into the fade. So for the fade, it's just using the trim once again. But this time we'll be using it with mask. So if you didn't know, you can double click and you can rename it to keep your stuff organized. So let's enable image mask and we'll call this fade. So for this, we don't need a very high resolution texture. So 1K texture is fine, and we click on OK. And let's go into the texture pane. So for the texturing, I'm going to use this and switch it to smoother. Let's see, I've not tried this before. Okay, so you basically just want to draw out the place, the side you want to be kind of trimmed. I also use the turn off the occlude and call. I think you can find it here in the tool. So if you go to probably fall off or options, okay, yeah, here in the options you can disable this, so it allows you to paint through the mesh. So I don't have symmetry turned on, but if I come here, you can see we painted through the mesh. I'm also gonna, I know, so it's not like full fade, almost like a mohawk going fade, somewhat like this. So now we can go ahead and save the image. You see nothing happening. That's just because in the fade you want to reduce. So we can set this 0.1. And you can see we have our fade going. If you see this wave line, the reason for it is the waves is still trying to seep through, since this coily modifier kind of it pushes the hair higher than the other ones. So we want to That's why we're still seeing it show through. So to fix it, we can go into the coily, the wave texture, and just paint out that area since it's going to be covered. We don't need any waves there. We need it to be clean. So there's no need to have waves at that position. So we can go ahead and save this, and we can see our waves coming through. At this region, if we need it to be kind of zero length, if you're a barber, or I mean, most guys that kind of cut their hair to this extent, will understand, but we want this to be at 0, so we can duplicate this fade. And create a new texture for it. And just paint where we want to be completely 0. Go ahead and save the image. Here we go. Everything came together nicely, so this fade is removing any extra hair we don't want. And now you can choose to increase the children count, so let's say we end up with like 100. So we have our fade and our waves going. Okay, so it's looking good, but a couple of issues. I mean, it's not issues, just my preference. I want, let's say we want this to kind of fade in better, because now the transition is a bit kind of harsh. To fix that, we just need to adjust the image. So let's bring out the fade. So this is the, I think I got the spelling of the fade wrong. But yeah. So we want to edit this like in a software like Photoshop. So you cannot edit it externally because we need to save this out. So I'll just save it out to my desktop as a PNG. And then now we can edit externally. It's going to open any editing software of your choice. To be able to do something like this, you just need to go to your file path, application, and for your image editor, you want to select the image editor you want to use for that. Okay, so here I will just apply the Gaussian blur. So you want to be careful doing this so it doesn't kind of mess up the image. I think before I do that, I'm going to probably this will even work. I will bring out the blacks some more, and then before I do the blur, so okay, so I can save this and come back to Blender and reload image. So take note of the hair. You can see we have better transition now between the hair. So the more blur you have, the better the transition. Okay, so we can go ahead and render this and let's compare. So as you can see, we have, if we compare the two, the transition is much better and smoother. And that's what we want. And we can probably finish this off with, I want to increase the wave slightly. Probably instead of doing that, I can just make it more coily. then increasing the size. So you can make this like 13. Just make it more prominent. So depending on what you're going for, this should kind of fix that issue for you. There we go. So I hope this tutorial was helpful. I hope you picked up a couple of tricks that you can use on your own project. But this is how you can go ahead to create your own faded hair with some waves. So that will be it for this tutorial. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up. If you wish to see more from me, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. So bye bye for now and see you next time.